Everybody set? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I hope everyone's commute was uneventful. I want to first thank our teams at VTrans and municipal employees for the long hours working overnight and today, plowing the roads. We very much appreciate all the good work. Speaking of roads, today we want to focus on the importance of planning ahead and investing in our critical infrastructure needs. In my budget address, as you might recall, I talked about the more than $150 million in surplus dollars we proposed in the budget to make sure we can leverage even more federal dollars over the next few years. Between all the federal programs passed recently, like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, billions more will be available to the states, in addition to all the ARPA money we're currently spending. But unlike ARPA, these programs are more traditional and require states to match a percentage of the money themselves in order to receive the federal money. And the return on investment is incredible. We will receive a minimum of $4 federal dollars for every dollar we invest. And in some cases, it's 10 times that amount. And here's the good news. We don't have to worry about where that match will come from because we have the money right now. This year we have a record amount of state surplus, which is why I believe it would be wise to dedicate $150 million of it to guarantee these funds are available when we need it. The reason I'm advocating for this set-aside is that we really don't know how the economy is going to do over the next few years. At our e-board meeting in January, the legislature's own economists told us we are likely to see revenue growth drop significantly in the coming years. That means we might not have the match money we need, putting important projects at risk, also putting us in a tough position of either cutting programs or raising taxes, and neither are good options. This is really about fiscal responsibility and good government, thinking ahead and being prepared. Dedicating the funding now would also provide certainty to our communities and the partners who do the work so they can plan ahead. And if there is an economic downturn, as many predict, the economic activity these projects provide will help people stay employed and our economy moving. Secretary Moore and Flynn will go into more detail about the much-needed infrastructure we're talking about, and Mayor Allaire from Rutland and Katie Buckley from VLCT will talk about how communities benefit from these investments. Because as I said in my budget address, this investment is all about communities, like work on Route 78 in Swanton, Route 2 between Cabot and Danville, Route 5 in Brattleboro, and connecting their regions with safe roads and clean water with projects in Bethel, Northfield, and Rutland. Not to mention the significant amount of broadband funding as well. We have a golden opportunity to be pragmatic and help assure that our infrastructure and economic needs are met in the future. And I'm hopeful the legislature sees the merits of this strategy as well. I'll now turn it over to Secretary Flynn for more.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has positioned Vermont to realize the largest dedicated transportation infrastructure investment likely since the onset of the Eisenhower Interstate Highway System. Vermont's transportation program is funded from the Federal Highway Administration in 5-year cycles referred to as FAST Act reauthorization. This most recent 5-year cycle is delivering $1.7 billion to the Agency of Transportation, which is an increase of $572 million from the prior 5-year cycle. With that comes additional pressures, as you've heard the governor say, to have the required state match, which in our case is typically 20%, to draw down those federal dollars. As the governor has said, ensuring right now that Vermont has secure and dedicated match money to utilize these federal funds to deliver increased transportation projects across our state just makes sense. And it will guarantee our ability to leverage this historic opportunity at that return on investment of 4 to 1. The governor's as recommended budget for 24 identifies $79 million from the current general fund surplus for fiscal 24, 25, and 26. This will put $342 million in transportation projects to work across Vermont. As a general practice, there is never a more cost-effective time to plan and to begin large construction projects than the present. Failure to secure this funding now can have ripple effects across the entire project delivery pipeline, delaying our ability to advertise, to go to bid, and to award contracts. Of 754 projects as of today, 223 transportation projects across Vermont will have their delivery schedules impacted over time. A few examples of actual projects and real impacts are: in Orwell, reconstruction of shoulders and widening Route 22A. Construction is currently planned for 2027, and it would be delayed until 2030. In Cabot to Danville, reconstructing US Route 2. Construction is planned to begin in 2026 and would be delayed until 2029. In Norton, up in Essex County, replacing bridge number 41 on Route 114. Construction is planned for 2028 and it would be delayed until 2032. In Franklin, replacing sidewalks on Main Street. Construction is planned to begin in 2023 and it would be delayed until 2025. Wolcott, replacing Bridge 6. Construction is planned to begin in 2025 and would be delayed until 2027. In West Rutland, US Route 4, replacing bridge decks on Bridge 13 and 14, both east and westbound. Construction is planned to begin in 2029. It would be delayed until 2035. And Brattleboro, reconstruction of US Route 5, Putney Road. Construction is planned to begin in 2028, and it would be delayed until 2033. But locking in these funds now will yield faster, more predictable projects, as the governor said, with substantial long-term savings, guaranteeing that federal investment of at least 4 to 1. And it does also ensure that we aren't put in a position in leaner economic times to make difficult decisions over what to cut or what taxes and fees to raise to cover the increased state match realities. Doing this now will allow Vermont communities and our industry partners the predictability to plan and to get things moving on these projects sooner. And you can see from the map, the projects at risk cover counties and towns across the state of Vermont. Vermonters need to be aware of these projects, and they need to be aware of the delays to these projects if match is not secured with certainty. And now I would introduce Secretary Julie Moore.
Good afternoon. I think it probably can go without saying, but Vermont has some of the oldest infrastructure in the country, and with age comes a whole lot of need. Part of the challenge with water infrastructure, which is the centerpiece of the Agency of Natural Resources, is that it's often out of sight and therefore out of mind. But just because it doesn't have our full attention, it can't be assumed to be working well. Water infrastructure is often the most valuable asset a community owns, with the total value of pumps, pipes, and treatment plants exceeding $50,000 for each household that's connected to the system. This valuable infrastructure requires significant ongoing investments to properly maintain it and prevent challenges to public health, the environment, economic growth, and climate resilience. Based on agency projections, there will be roughly $2 billion of investment needed in water infrastructure. This means drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater over the next 10 years alone in Vermont. This is to both refurbish existing systems and to prepare this essential infrastructure for the increasingly disruptive and potentially devastating effects of climate change. Fortunately, we are at a unique point where there is unprecedented federal resources available to invest in water infrastructure. Vermont is eligible to receive an infusion of nearly $320 million into our state revolving loan funds as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The Revolving Loan Fund program is an EPA partnership that provides communities with grants and low-cost financing for a wide range of water infrastructure projects. In order to access these federal funds, however, Vermont needs to provide $27 million in state match, and the governor's FY24 recommended budget creates a reserve that ensures Vermont will have that required match. These resources will be used to support dozens of projects, as shown on the map to my right, and rolls up to things like $155 million to refurbish existing drinking water and wastewater systems to ensure that this core infrastructure continues to support vibrant communities. Nearly $150 million to support lead service line replacement projects across Vermont, which will improve drinking water quality. And more than $40 million during the same time period to address emerging contaminants like PFAS by improving drinking water and wastewater treatment. These projects are significant undertakings, as Secretary Flynn spoke to, that require robust planning and engineering design. This means that there's often a long lead time needed for a community to ready a water infrastructure project for implementation. And given the level of effort, needed lead time, and competing demands on community priorities, confidence that this funding will be available to support implementation when the time comes is critical. If Vermont were to forego making the commitment this fiscal year, it will add uncertainty for communities, making it harder and potentially more expensive to plan for and execute on these critical projects. In fully committing the state funds to access literally hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars in federal resources, it makes clear Vermont's commitment to supporting our communities and investing in critical water infrastructure projects. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie Buckley from the League of Cities and Towns.
Hi there. During the summer of 2021, 276 towns, cities, and villages across Vermont took a big leap in accepting over $200 million in local American Rescue Plan Act funds. Many who have never worked with federal money before accepted it with fear, anxiety, and uncertainty of what it really meant to manage and spend these dollars without final rules for them even being established yet. They accepted this money with the hope and promise that their local ARPA money can unlock and leverage additional grants that would soon follow through the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Over the last 18 months, communities of all sizes and capacity levels across the state have taken their time, been patient, and are thinking bigger. They understand that if there was ever a moment to be strategic and take advantage of one-time money to help make big investments to repair and replace crumbling infrastructure or develop new infrastructure, now is that moment. It's a rare opportunity, one that most of us in this room will never see again. Towns, cities, and villages can use their local ARPA money as much needed grant match to leverage other federal dollars. Often towns, big and small, struggle to come up with that grant match. But now, with ARPA, they have it in hand. Rare. They're relying on the state of Vermont to pull down its share of federal money that's available now so that we, all of us, can emerge from this moment stronger and more resilient. With so many competing priorities, it's hard to set aside the state's share of grant match, but it is critical to do so in this moment. If we do not, we lose this rare opportunity. Crumbling infrastructure itself will not heal. New infrastructure to meet our housing crisis, climate initiatives, and make us safer and more resilient will not just magically appear. All of it is necessary. If we do it now, Vermonters win. If we do it later, Vermonters lose. We will put this work off and onto the backs of taxpayers with a growing price tag, and we push Vermont deeper into a crisis of affordability. Our towns, cities, and villages are waiting for the state to deliver these federal dollars so that they can do their part to make transformational changes in their communities. We're grateful to the governor and his administration for working so hard to bring these dollars to Vermont to ensure this happens. And at this point, I'll pass it to Mayor David Allaire.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to bring Vermont's perspective to this discussion. I'm especially pleased with this proposal from the governor for this purpose because this is exactly what we did with setting aside $400,000 from our ARPA allocation of $4.5 million for the same reason. readily available matching funds for state and federal grant opportunities. It's a good strategy, whether it's water, sewer, or stormwater infrastructure, or traditional roads and bridges. Good infrastructure can open up so many opportunities for our cities and towns. For example, Rutland has $7.85 million in bond requests on the ballot on town meeting to continue our aggressive schedule of infrastructure improvements, which are so vital to our economic development efforts. You know, as mayor, I also know that it's important to plan ahead. Sometimes you don't see the fruits of your investments you make right away, but that doesn't mean they're not worthwhile. Since first being elected, our DPW commissioners, first Jeff Wenberg and now Jim Rotundo, have worked closely with state government to identify projects and available funding from the various sources for our infrastructure needs. You know, good government, anticipating needs and being proactive and having a degree of certainty helps people plan. That's why it makes all kinds of sense for the state to set aside this money now, while we have it in surpluses, to ensure we can take full advantage of federal funds in the years to come, when we don't know if state coffers will be as full. As the governor mentioned, knowing we had projects on the horizon and the funding to achieve them can also help keep people employed, which is so important, and the economy moving if we see tougher economic times ahead, as many people predict. So to close, I believe the state of Vermont, as well as the citizens of Rutland, will benefit from this strategy as we stretch federal dollars as much as we can and plan for the future for our children and grandchildren. So thank you again for this opportunity. I appreciate it very much. It's good to see everyone, and I will now hand it back to the governor.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And at this point in time, we'll open up to questions.
Governor, are you hearing from your colleagues in the legislature a willingness or a desire not to set aside match money? I mean, I know the legislature is still building their budget, but have you heard of any of them not doing this?
I'm hearing a little bit of both. There are some legislators that are fully supportive of making sure that we have the money we need for match, and then I'm hearing from others maybe they had other priorities for surplus dollars. So I'm hearing a mixed response. We want to make sure the message is loud and clear. This is very important to me, and I think that it's important to the state of Vermont. It's important to our economy to make sure that we have these dollars that we have right now, that we can invest in these projects for the future. And there's no better time than now to set that aside.
Of course, it raises, with all of these infrastructure projects, the question about workforce as well. I know that's been, especially for the water and sewer and road projects, how are we faring and how are we looking as these monies are coming down the pike in terms of our workforce to build these out?
Yeah, there's no doubt we have a workforce shortage in the state. We talk about that a lot. But I will say the industry seems to have been able to keep up. In fact, I've heard from some who are looking for work at this point in time. So again, with a possible downturn in the economy, having this money and making sure there's some predictability in the future, some certainty, will keep the economy rolling. And I think everyone is wondering, how will this land? How will the economy land? And when will the inflation stop? And when will we need this? And I think it's has a lot of merit to put it aside and make sure that we're prepared right now.
Secretary Flynn listed off a number of projects that could face multi-year delays if Vermont is not able to come up with the matches. Are you saying that those delays would come to pass if lawmakers don't allocate the match money in FY24?
If we don't have the match money in general, because I'm not sure that we'll have it in the future, because we don't know if we're going to have surpluses. We've been very fortunate in the 6 years I've been governor, about at least half of them we've had surpluses. But previous to that, there was a long stretch where we had no surplus. In fact, we had deficits. And I've been in business, I've been in the state, I've been in this legislature